Chapter 1. A steady kind of Wednesday. Jason Willis left his office at 5:12 p.m. because that was when his workday ended and because there was no reason to pretend otherwise. The building behind him hummed softly, glass and steel reflecting a sky that hadn't quite decided whether it wanted to rain. Jason adjusted the strap of his messenger bag on his shoulder and started the 3-block walk home, hands relaxed, pace unhurried. He liked walking. It gave his mind time to settle. Jason was 28 years old, 5'10", brown hair that behaved when asked politely, and a face people tended to forget 5 minutes after meeting him. He knew this. He was fine with it. He didn't need to be memorable to strangers. His life worked. He had no debt. His retirement accounts were boring in the best possible way. He liked his job. Not in a "this fulfills my soul" way, but in a "this pays me fairly and I don't dread Mondays" way. His apartment was small, clean, and chosen deliberately because it was close enough to work that he could walk and far enough from downtown that sirens didn't punctuate his nights. Steady. That word followed him like a shadow. Some people said it like a compliment. Some said it like an apology. Jason didn't mind either. He wasn't avoiding life. He wasn't afraid of excitement. He simply believed that chaos aged poorly. He'd watched friends marry fireworks and end up sifting through ashes before 30. He believed love mattered, but respect was the thing that stayed when attraction got tired. He was saving for his future wife. Not in a desperate way, in a practical way, like someone who bought extra batteries because someday the power would go out. He stopped at the crosswalk 2 blocks from his apartment and waited for the light to change. Traffic rolled past, tires whispering against asphalt. He checked his phone out of habit, saw nothing urgent, and slipped it back into his pocket. That was when he noticed the woman across the street. She stood on the curb, one foot awkwardly angled, the other wrapped in a white cast that stretched from ankle to midcalf. Crutches tucked under her arms. A canvas grocery bag hanging from one wrist. She looked like she was participating in an elaborate balancing experiment she had not signed up for. The light changed. Cars slowed. Some stopped. Others rolled forward impatiently. The woman didn't move. She looked at the crosswalk, then at the cars, then down at her foot. Her jaw tightened. Jason didn't think. He stepped off the curb and crossed toward her, raising one hand slightly to signal he was coming through traffic. When he reached her side, he stopped at a respectful distance. "Ma'am," he said, voice calm. "Hi, my name's Jason. Would you like some help crossing?" She looked up at him, eyes sharp and assessing despite the situation. "Well," she said, "I was hoping someone would offer before I turned into a street decoration." Jason smiled. "I figured it was worth asking." She shifted her weight carefully. "If you don't mind holding the bag, I think I can manage the rest without falling flat on my face." "I'd be happy to," he said, taking the bag gently. They crossed together, Jason matching her careful pace, shielding her from the occasional impatient driver with nothing more than his presence and a polite but immovable posture. On the other side, she exhaled. "Thank you," she said. "Most people pretend not to see these days." Jason shrugged lightly. "I saw." She laughed at that. A quick, delighted sound. "Well, since you've already committed to heroics, would you mind walking me a bit farther? My house is just 3 blocks that way." Jason glanced in the direction she indicated. It happened to be the same direction he was going. "Not a problem at all," he said. They walked slowly. She told him her name was Clara Finch. She asked him what he did for work, where he lived, whether he liked his job. Jason answered honestly but briefly, never overselling, never minimizing. At her house, a modest ranch with carefully tended flower beds, she stopped and looked at him thoughtfully. "You didn't once check your phone," she observed. Jason blinked. "Oh, I didn't realize." "That's because you weren't trying to be impressive," she said. "That's rare." She reached for her keys, then paused. "You've been very kind," she said. "Would you come in for tea? It would make me feel like I've properly thanked you." Jason hesitated only long enough to remember his mother's voice. When someone offers gratitude, you accept it with humility. "I'd be honored," he said. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and lemon. Framed photos lined the walls. Family, holidays, a young woman with dark hair, and an expressive smile appearing in more than one. Eleanor noticed him looking. "That's my granddaughter, Clara," she said casually. "Brilliant girl. Terrible luck with men." Jason nearly choked on his tea. "Oh," he said politely because politeness was reflex. Eleanor watched him over the rim of her cup, eyes glinting. "Well," she said, "one never knows when a Wednesday might turn interesting." Jason smiled, unaware that his steady life had just shifted, quietly, intentionally. One small step off the curb. Chapter 2. Tea, biscuits, and a plot. Jason had been in exactly 2 strangers' homes in his adult life, and both had involved some form of minor emergency. The first was a flooded basement. The second was Mrs. Clara Finch's living room, where he now sat on a floral sofa that had clearly been purchased during a decade that believed color was a moral stance. Eleanor maneuvered herself into an armchair opposite him with practiced efficiency, crutches propped neatly to one side like disciplined soldiers. She poured tea from a porcelain teapot with blue vines winding around its body, her hands steady despite her injury. "You take sugar?" she asked. Yes, please, Jason said. One is perfect. Her eyebrow lifted a fraction. Specific, but not demanding. I like that. Jason smiled politely and accepted the cup when she handed it to him. Placing it carefully on the coaster, she slid across the table with equal care. The room felt warm, lived in, and deliberate, like someone who believed a house should reflect the people inside it rather than impress anyone passing by. Eleanor settled back and regarded him openly. So, she said, drawing the word out. Jason. Yes, ma'am. You didn't hesitate, she continued. Out there. You didn't look around to see if someone else might help instead. Jason considered that. I suppose it didn't occur to me not to. She sipped her tea. Most people these days are very busy not occurring. Jason laughed softly before he could stop himself. That's one way to put it. She set her cup down and clasped her hands. Tell me, are you married? No, ma'am. Engaged? No. Divorced? Jason shook his head. Never married. Her eyes sharpened, not unkindly. Children? No. Well, she said, leaning back. That narrows nothing and tells me everything. Jason wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he didn't. Silence, he'd learned, was often an invitation rather than a gap. Eleanor studied him another moment, then waved a hand dismissively. Relax. I'm not interrogating you. I'm simply curious about people who do the right thing when they think no one is watching. Jason took a sip of tea. It was excellent. He said so. I don't believe in raising men who need applause, she said. My late husband didn't either. I think my parents would agree with you, Jason replied. She smiled at that, softer now. Good parents show up in the details. She gestured toward a small plate on the table between them. Biscuit. Thank you. Jason took one, breaking it carefully. These are homemade? Of course, she said, offended by the implication otherwise. I may be temporarily wounded, but I am not helpless. They ate in companionable quiet for a moment. Jason felt oddly at ease, as if this visit had slotted neatly into his day rather than disrupted it. That surprised him. Eleanor, meanwhile, was thinking. You noticed the flowers, she said casually. Yes, ma'am. They're beautiful. Planted them all myself, she said. Well, not this year, obviously, but I know each one, what it needs, when it blooms, what kind of attention it responds to. Jason nodded. They look well cared for. They are, she said pointedly. People aren't so different, you know? Most just want to be tended to without being smothered. Jason smiled. That seems reasonable. Oh, it is, Eleanor said, which is why so many people manage to make a mess of it. She glanced toward the hallway, where a framed photo sat atop a small table. The young woman from before smiled back at them, eyes bright, chin lifted as if she were mid-sentence. My granddaughter Clara lives across town, Eleanor said, as though continuing a previous thought. She calls me every Sunday and pretends not to be lonely. Jason felt something shift in the air. Not pressure exactly, but intention. She's smart, Eleanor continued, kind, terribly patient with nonsense she shouldn't tolerate, and exhausted by men who don't know what they want. Jason kept his expression neutral. He'd been on the receiving end of well-meaning matchmaking before. He respected the impulse without inviting the follow-through. I imagine dating can be difficult, he said carefully. Oh, it's dreadful, Eleanor replied briskly. Everyone wants the benefits of commitment without the inconvenience of character. Jason nearly choked on his tea this time. Eleanor smiled, satisfied. You see? You understand exactly what I mean. I think, Jason said slowly, that people sometimes confuse attraction with intention. She pointed at him. That's it. Exactly that. They sat in silence again, but it was a charged silence now. Pleasant, but alert. Jason, Eleanor said at last, are you looking for someone? He considered the question seriously because she deserved that. Yes, he said, but I'm not in a hurry. Good, she said immediately. Hurry is how people miss things worth having. Jason relaxed slightly. She nodded to herself, then added, Clara is also not in a hurry. She just hates wasting time. Jason laughed, genuine this time. I can respect that. Eleanor's smile widened. I thought you might. She shifted in her chair, then reached for the crutches. Now, I won't insult either of you by pretending this is destiny or that you owe me anything. I simply believe good people should occasionally be placed in the same room and allowed to decide for themselves. Jason set his cup down. That sounds fair. Excellent, she said. Then you won't mind if I invite you both for coffee sometime. He hesitated, but only briefly. I wouldn't mind at all, he said. As long as Clara doesn't feel obligated. Oh, she won't, Eleanor said with confidence. She's very good at saying no. Jason nodded. So am I. Eleanor laughed, delighted. Even better. She glanced at the clock. You should be going. You've already done enough for one Wednesday. Jason stood and thanked her again, helping her to the door despite her playful protests. As he stepped outside, the air cooler now, he felt something unfamiliar but not unwelcome. Not excitement. Possibility. And for the first time in a long while, Jason wondered, not anxiously, not urgently, but with quiet curiosity, whether Steady might soon include someone walking beside him. Chapter 3, the granddaughter who was tired of trying. Clara Finch deleted the dating app on a Tuesday night, which felt poetic in a way she did not care to examine too closely. She sat cross-legged on her couch, phone glowing in her hand, thumb hovering over the screen as if the app might plead for its life. It did not. It simply blinked at her, full of smiling men holding fish, blurry group photos where she was meant to guess which one she was supposed to find attractive, and bios that confused sarcasm with personality. She sighed, pressed delete, and watched the icon vanish. There. Done. Her apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping against the window. Clara leaned back, letting her head rest against the couch cushion, eyes closed. She wasn't bitter. That was the frustrating part. If she were bitter, she could blame the world and be done with it. But she wasn't. She was just tired. Tired of conversations that never quite went anywhere. Tired of men who wanted the benefits of closeness without the weight of intention. Tired of feeling like wanting something solid made her old-fashioned or naive. She wanted a partner, not a project. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Grandma Eleanor flashed across the screen. Clara smiled despite herself and answered. "Hi, Grandma." "Hello, darling," Eleanor said brightly. "Are you sitting down?" Clara eyed the ceiling. "I am." "That sounds ominous." "Nonsense. I just wanted to tell you I met a very nice young man today." Clara closed her eyes. "Grandma. His name is Jason," Eleanor continued undeterred. "He helped me cross the street, carried my groceries home, and accepted tea without looking at his phone once." "That's a very nice," Clara said carefully. "And he's single." There it was. "Grandma," Clara said again, this time with affection rather than warning. "You cannot collect men like stray cats." "I absolutely can," Eleanor replied. "And sometimes they're housebroken." Clara laughed. "I am not being set up." "I didn't say set up," Eleanor said. "I said coffee." "No," Clara said, smiling anyway. "I am not doing blind coffee." "It wouldn't be blind," Eleanor countered. "I've seen him. He has kind eyes." "That's not helpful." "He also believes respect lasts longer than attraction." Clara stilled. There was a pause on the line, filled only by the sound of rain and Clara's own thoughts, which she did not particularly enjoy examining at the moment. "You're not being fair," Clara said finally. "You know I'm done with dating right now." "I know you're done with nonsense," Eleanor corrected gently. "That's different." Clara rubbed her forehead. "You don't even know if we'd like each other." "That's the point," Eleanor said. "You'd find out." Clara exhaled slowly. She loved her grandmother. Loved her fiercely. Eleanor Finch had raised 3 children, buried 1 husband, and navigated life with a sharp wit and a sharper sense of people. She did not meddle lightly. "Is he looking for something serious?" Clara asked despite herself. "Yes," Eleanor said without hesitation. "But he's not desperate." Clara snorted. "Low bar." "Sadly," Eleanor agreed. "But he's also not in a hurry." That gave Clara pause. Men were usually in a hurry, to define nothing, to avoid labels, to keep options open. Or they were in a hurry to rush intimacy without responsibility. Very few were unhurried in the way that suggested patience rather than indecision. "What does he do?" Clara asked. "He likes his job," Eleanor said. "He walks home from work to save money and get fresh air." Clara smiled faintly. "That's oddly specific." "I pay attention," Eleanor said. "So, coffee. No expectations. Just 2 adults talking." Clara stared at the rain-streaked window. She thought of the app she'd just deleted, of the conversations that fizzled, of the friends who told her to lower her standards as if standards were decorative pillows rather than load-bearing walls. "Fine," she said at last. "Coffee. Once." Eleanor beamed through the phone. Clara could hear it. "Wonderful. I'll make the arrangements." "Grandma," Clara warned. "No ambushes." "I would never," Eleanor said, which meant absolutely nothing. They hung up, and Clara set her phone aside, heart doing something irritatingly like fluttering. She stood and went to the kitchen, making herself tea she did not particularly want, just to have something to do with her hands. She was not hopeful, but she was curious. Jason found out about the coffee invitation the following evening, while sitting at his kitchen table eating leftovers and listening to a podcast he half enjoyed. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Eleanor Finch, Jason, dear. I hope you made it home safely yesterday. I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to join me and my granddaughter for coffee this Saturday." Jason paused mid-bite. He stared at the message for a moment, then set his fork down. He didn't feel anxious. That surprised him. He felt open. He typed carefully. "Jason, I did, thank you again for the tea. I'd be happy to join you, as long as your granddaughter is comfortable with it." The response came quickly. "Eleanor Finch." She agreed. "She's sensible, not desperate. You'll like her." Jason smiled at that. Sensible sounded promising. He set the phone down and finished his meal, thoughts drifting, not racing, toward Saturday. Saturday morning arrived without ceremony. Clara chose her outfit with minimal effort. Dark jeans, a soft sweater, ankle boots. She refused to dress for an imaginary impression. If she liked him, she wanted it to be because he saw her, not because she performed. Jason, meanwhile, wore a button-down and a jacket he liked because it fit well and did not ask questions. He arrived 10 minutes early because punctuality was not a strategy, it was respect. The coffee shop Eleanor chose was small, bright, and smelled like roasted beans and baked bread. Eleanor sat at a corner table. Crutches leaned against the wall, eyes lighting up when she saw them arrive from opposite directions. Perfect timing, she said cheerfully. Jason stood as Clara approached, instinctive and unself-conscious. Hi, Jason. Clara, she replied, meeting his eyes. They shook hands, an unexpectedly grounding gesture, and something subtle passed between them. Not sparks, recognition. They sat. Eleanor watched them with satisfaction, then clapped her hands lightly. Now, I need the restroom. Don't behave until I get back. And she was gone. Jason and Clara looked at each other, then laughed softly, easily. Well, Clara said, this is already better than most first dates. Jason smiled. Agreed. They ordered coffee. They talked. About work. About books. About why they both preferred honesty over charm. Neither tried to impress. Neither pretended not to care. And somewhere between the second sip and the first real laugh, both of them realized something quietly remarkable. This wasn't hard. Chapter 4. Coffee without games. The first thing Jason noticed, after the way Clara laughed without covering her mouth, after the calm intelligence in her eyes, was how little effort the conversation required. They sat across from each other at the small round table, coffee cups warming their hands, the low murmur of the cafe wrapping around them like a shared secret. Eleanor had not yet returned, which felt intentional in a way that made Jason faintly amused and Clara openly suspicious. So, Clara said, stirring her coffee though it clearly didn't need it. How long do you think we have before she comes back with a list of wedding venues? Jason smiled. I'm guessing she's giving us exactly enough time to decide whether we'd like to escape through separate exits. That checks out, Clara said. She's very efficient with her meddling. I wouldn't call it meddling, Jason said gently. More like strategic optimism. Clara laughed, a real one, the kind that tilted her head back slightly before she caught herself. You've known her for a day and you already sound like someone defending her in court. She makes a compelling case, Jason replied. Also, she makes excellent tea. That's how she gets you, Clara said. First it's tea. Then it's life advice you didn't ask for but somehow needed. Jason nodded solemnly. I respect a well-executed plan. They shared a smile, and Clara felt something in her chest loosen. She hadn't realized how tightly wounded she'd been until now. So, she said, leaning back, you're not intimidated by being vetted? Jason considered the word. I don't mind being known. That gave her pause. Most people say that, Clara said slowly. But what they mean is they don't mind being liked. Jason met her gaze steadily. I think being known is more useful. She studied him, searching for performance, for exaggeration, for the subtle tells of someone trying to impress her. She found none. That's refreshingly inconvenient, she said. Jason chuckled. I get that a lot. They talked about work next. Clara was a communications strategist for a nonprofit, work she cared about deeply but spoke of without dramatics. Jason listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions without trying to solve anything. What about you? She asked. Eleanor said you like your job. I do, Jason said. I work in operations for a mid-sized logistics firm. It's not glamorous. Clara smiled. Neither is mine. I like that, he said. Glamour doesn't usually hold up under stress. She raised an eyebrow. That's oddly philosophical for someone who just ordered a plain latte. Jason laughed. I'm consistent. I can tell, Clara said. You walk to work, don't you? He blinked. She told you that? She did, Clara said. Along with the fact that you don't check your phone when you're with people. Jason shrugged. I try not to. I figure if I'm somewhere, I should be there. Clara absorbed that quietly. You know, she said, that's not as common as it should be. I know, Jason replied, but I don't think rarity makes it heroic. No, she agreed. It just makes it noticeable. They fell into a comfortable rhythm after that, the kind where silence didn't feel like a test. Jason told her about his friends. Men like him, steady and intentional, quietly preparing for lives they hoped to share someday. They're good men, he said. Not flashy, but they show up. Clara smiled at that, something soft and thoughtful. I like men who show up. I had a feeling you might, Jason said. She tilted her head. Oh, well, he said, choosing his words carefully. You didn't cancel. She laughed. That's your bar. No, he said quickly. It's just a good start. Clara watched him for a moment, then nodded. Fair. Eleanor returned then, balancing a small plate of pastries like a trophy. Well, she asked, sitting down. Has anyone fled? Not yet, Clara said. Good, Eleanor replied. I'd hate to have wasted perfectly good coffee. She took a bite of a pastry and watched them both over the rim of her glasses. Now, I'm going to be very clear. You owe each other nothing. Jason nodded. Agreed. Clara echoed it. Absolutely. But, Eleanor continued cheerfully, you do owe yourselves honesty. Jason smiled. Clara felt a surprising swell of gratitude. After a bit more conversation, lighter now, easier, Eleanor checked her watch. Well, she said, standing with effort, I think I've orchestrated enough for one morning. Jason, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, Jason said sincerely. She turned to Clara. Walk me to the door? They did, leaving Jason at the table, giving him space without making it awkward. He appreciated that. When Clara returned, she hesitated for just a moment, then sat back down. I don't usually do this, she said. Jason raised his hands slightly. We can end it here if you'd like. No pressure. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. I meant, I don't usually leave things undefined. He nodded. Me neither. She took a breath. I'd like to see you again. Jason smiled. Not triumphant, not relieved, just pleased. I'd like that too. She laughed softly. You didn't even pretend to think about it. I already did, he said. I was just waiting for you. That earned him a look, surprised, amused, approving. Okay, she said. One more thing. Yes. No games, she said. If this stops working, we say so. Deal, Jason said. Same rules. They stood together, walked toward the door. Outside, the air was crisp, the afternoon unfolding without urgency. Clara paused. Coffee again? Jason smiled. Absolutely. They parted ways, not clinging, not rushing, each walking back into their separate lives with something new alongside them. Not fireworks, something better. Steady. Chapter 5. The men Jason keeps. Jason's friends knew something was different the moment he showed up on Thursday night without a contingency plan. Normally, Jason arrived at their weekly dinner with leftovers neatly portioned for the next day, a clear exit time, and a standing excuse involving an early morning. This time, he came empty-handed except for a six-pack of decent beer and an expression that suggested he wasn't watching the clock. Ethan noticed first. You're relaxed, Ethan said, narrowing his eyes as Jason set the beer on the counter. I don't trust it. I'm always relaxed, Jason replied, slipping off his jacket. No, Marcus said from the couch. You're usually composed. This is relaxed. Something happened. Jason smiled faintly. I had coffee with someone. The room went quiet in the way only male friends could manage, simultaneously respectful and feral. Ethan leaned forward. Someone. Yes. Marcus raised a finger. Was it voluntary? Jason laughed. Yes. Was it intentional? Ethan pressed. Yes. Marcus sat back. Gentlemen, we have a development. They ordered food, settled in, and waited with the patience of men who knew Jason wouldn't be rushed but would be honest. She's Eleanor Finch's granddaughter, Jason began. Her name is Clara. Ethan nodded slowly. Already sounds like someone who reads. She does, Jason confirmed. And listens. That got their attention. Marcus muted the TV. Okay, start over. No summaries. What did you feel? Jason considered that carefully. I didn't feel like I needed to convince her of anything, he said. I didn't feel like I had to edit myself. Ethan whistled softly. That's rare. She didn't perform either, Jason added. No games. No pretending not to care. Marcus leaned back. You look like someone who found a quiet room in a loud building. Jason smiled at the accuracy. She told me up front. No games, Jason said. If it stops working, we say so. Ethan nodded approvingly. That's healthy. Marcus smirked. Terrifying, but healthy. They ate in thoughtful silence for a moment. So, Ethan said eventually, are you afraid? Jason shook his head. No, that surprised them. I'm aware, Jason clarified, of the risks, but not afraid. Marcus grinned. That's worse. That means you're actually open. Jason accepted that with a nod. What about her? Ethan asked. Does she know what she wants? Yes, Jason said. And she's tired of pretending she doesn't. Marcus raised his beer. To women who refuse to shrink their expectations. They clinked bottles. Don't mess this up, Ethan said casually. Jason smiled. I don't plan to. Clara, meanwhile, was having a parallel conversation with her own friends, though with significantly more dramatic gesturing. He stood up, Clara said, pacing her living room. Like immediately. No hesitation. Her friend Lena rolled her eyes affectionately. That's the bar now? No, Clara said. That was the first 30 seconds. And then he listened, Clara continued. Actually listened. Didn't wait for his turn to talk. Didn't try to top my story. Maya frowned thoughtfully. Did he flirt? Yes, Clara said. But gently, like he wasn't trying to win anything. Lena exchanged a look with Maya. That's either very good or deeply unsettling. Exactly, Clara said. I don't know what to do with someone who isn't posturing. Maya smiled. You could try being yourself. Clara groaned. That's the problem. I was. She sank onto the couch. He said he's saving for his future wife, Clara said quietly. Lena blinked. On a first coffee? It came up naturally, Clara said. And it wasn't heavy. It was just a fact. Maya nodded slowly. That's intention, not pressure. I know, Clara said. And I didn't feel cornered. I felt considered. Lena smiled. You like him? Clara hesitated, then nodded. I respect him. Maya grinned. That's better. Jason and Clara met again the following week. Dinner this time. No ceremony. No expectations beyond showing up. They talked about money honestly without posturing. About family. About the mistakes they'd made and the lessons they'd kept. Jason walked Clara to her car. Thank you for tonight, he said simply. Thank you for being clear, she replied. He smiled. Clarity saves time. She paused, keys in hand. Jason. Yes. I'm not dating anyone else. He met her eyes. Neither am I. They stood there a moment longer than necessary. Not touching, not rushing. Respect first. Everything else could follow. Chapter 6, Fear Wears Practical Shoes. Fear, Jason had learned, rarely announced itself. It didn't show up as panic or cold feet or sudden doubt. It showed up as practicality, as reasonable questions, as caution that looked suspiciously like wisdom if you weren't paying attention. He recognized it the third week he knew Clara, while standing in the produce aisle of his neighborhood grocery store, staring at two nearly identical cartons of eggs and thinking about nothing important at all. He reached for the cheaper one, then paused. Is this the kind of decision you want to bring someone into? A quiet voice asked. Jason frowned slightly and took the carton anyway. The question lingered not because it was dramatic, but because it was new. He wasn't afraid of Clara. He was afraid of the weight she carried, not as a burden, but as a possibility. They had been seeing each other once or twice a week. Dinner, walks, long conversations that stretched past what either of them had intended. No physical rush, no artificial pacing. It felt adult in a way that was deeply disarming. They spoke plainly, about expectations, about money, about family history and the mistakes that still had sharp edges. It was the easiest hard thing he'd ever done, which was precisely why Fear had started putting on sensible clothes and asking intelligent questions. Clara noticed something was off before Jason did. He was still present, still kind, still consistent. But there was a slight delay now, like a half-second pause before answering questions that hadn't required thought before. She noticed it during a walk one evening, the city quiet around them, their steps naturally in sync. My lease is up in 6 months, she said casually. I'm thinking of staying in my neighborhood. Jason nodded. That makes sense. You like it there. I do, she said. Then, gently, you hesitated. He glanced at her. Did I? Yes, she said. You didn't before. Jason slowed, stopping near a lamppost that hummed softly overhead. I'm not pulling away, he said, instinctively defensive but calm. I didn't say you were, Clara replied. I'm just asking what changed. He considered deflecting. It would have been easy, but they'd made a rule. No games. I think, he said slowly, I'm becoming more aware of what this could become. Clara waited. And that makes me want to do it well, he continued. Which means I'm thinking more. She studied him, arms folded loosely, expression thoughtful rather than accusatory. That's not fear, she said. That's care. It can be both, Jason replied. She smiled faintly. Fair. They resumed walking. I don't want to rush you, Clara said after a moment. I'm not asking for decisions. I know, Jason said. And I appreciate that. She glanced at him. But you don't want to drift. No, he said immediately. I don't drift. Neither do I, she said. I just also don't sprint. He laughed softly. You're very good at this. At what? Naming things without inflating them, Jason said. It makes it harder to hide. That's the idea, Clara replied. The next day, Jason sat with his friends again, this time quieter than usual. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. You look like someone who's doing math he didn't plan for, Ethan said. Jason smiled thinly. That's accurate. Marcus leaned forward. Are you happy? Yes, Jason said without hesitation. Then what's the problem? Marcus asked. Jason exhaled. I'm aware that being intentional means eventually choosing. Ethan nodded slowly. And choosing means risk. Yes, Marcus grinned. Welcome to adulthood. Jason shook his head. I've been an adult. This is different. Ethan studied him. Are you afraid of her? No. Of yourself. Ethan pressed. Jason paused. That, he said, might be closer. They let that sit. You've always been careful, Marcus said. That's not a flaw. I know, Jason replied. But I don't want careful to turn into avoidance. Ethan nodded approvingly. Good. Then don't let it. Clara had her own reckoning that week, though it arrived dressed as irritation. She found herself annoyed at small things. Friends who complained about their relationships without doing anything to improve them. coworkers who treated their jobs like temporary inconveniences rather than commitments. Jason wasn't the problem. He was the mirror. She realized it one night while brushing her teeth, staring at her own reflection and thinking about how calm she felt around him. Calm had always unsettled her. She was used to intensity masquerading as passion, to emotional volatility being mistaken for depth. Jason was neither volatile nor shallow. He was steady in a way that required her to lower her guard, not because he demanded it, but because he made it unnecessary. That terrified her. She called Eleanor. "Are you afraid of being known?" Eleanor asked after Clara finished venting. "Yes," Clara admitted. "And I hate that." Eleanor hummed thoughtfully. "Fear doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're standing near something that matters." Clara sighed. "I don't want to lose myself." "You won't," Eleanor said. "You're not fragile. You're just unused to safety." Clara swallowed. The tension surfaced, not as an argument but as a moment. They were cooking dinner together at Jason's apartment, moving easily around each other, sharing space without friction. Clara was chopping vegetables when she spoke. "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" she asked. Jason stiffened almost imperceptibly. She noticed. "That wasn't a trap," she said quickly. "You don't have to answer." "No," he said. "I want to." He set the pan down and leaned against the counter. "I see myself married," he said. "With kids, if I'm fortunate. Stable. Present." Clara nodded slowly. "I see something similar." He hesitated. "And that's where my caution comes in." She met his eyes. "Because now it's not theoretical." "Yes," he admitted. "Because now I'm picturing you in that future, and I want to be certain I'm worthy of it." Clara's chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. "You don't have to earn me," she said softly. "You just have to choose me." He nodded. "I know." They stood there, the food forgotten, the moment delicate but solid. Fear didn't leave, but it changed shape. It stopped pretending to be wisdom and became what it was, a signpost, not a wall. And for the first time, both of them understood that steadiness didn't mean standing still. It meant moving forward on purpose. Chapter 7, Choosing, Not Drifting. Jason made his decision on a Tuesday morning that looked exactly like every other Tuesday morning. That was how he knew it was the right kind. No surge of adrenaline. No cinematic clarity. Just a quiet certainty that settled into place while he stood at his kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee mug and watching the water bead and slide down ceramic. He wasn't afraid anymore, not because the risk was gone, but because he'd stopped pretending that carefulness was the same thing as virtue. Careful could become passive if left unchecked. And Jason did not drift. He dried the mug, set it in the cabinet, and reached for his phone. Clara was in the middle of editing a document when her phone buzzed. "Jason, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? At my place." No pressure, just intention. She stared at the message longer than necessary, her chest tightening in that familiar, uncomfortable way that came when something mattered. Then she smiled. "Clara, yes, I'd like that." She set the phone down and exhaled slowly. Choosing went both ways. Jason cooked because cooking was honest. There was nowhere to hide in it. You either paid attention or you didn't. You either prepared or you reacted too late. It rewarded patience and punished neglect. Not harshly, but consistently. He made roasted chicken, vegetables, and a simple pasta. Nothing flashy. Everything done well. When Clara arrived, he opened the door before she could knock. Not because he was hovering, but because he'd been ready. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he replied. They smiled, not tentative, not giddy, comfortable. She slipped off her shoes without asking. He noticed and appreciated the ease of it. Dinner unfolded without ceremony. They talked about their days, about small things that felt less small because they were shared. At one point, Clara laughed mid-sentence and stopped herself. "What?" Jason asked. "I just realized," she said, shaking her head. "I'm not bracing for anything." He nodded. "Neither am I." They ate slowly. When the dishes were cleared, Jason poured tea. Not Eleanor's, but close enough to feel like a nod in her direction. They sat at the table a moment longer than necessary. "Can I say something?" Jason asked. Clara met his eyes. "Always. I don't want to approach this like a negotiation," he said. "I don't want to manage outcomes." She nodded. "Good. Neither do I. I want to choose you," he continued. "Not because I've eliminated all uncertainty, but because I trust your character. And mine." Clara felt emotion rise, not sharp, not overwhelming, just present. "That's the first time anyone said it like that," she said quietly. Jason held her gaze. "Is that okay?" "Yes," she said. "It's more than okay." She reached for his hand, not urgently, not to claim, but to connect. He laced his fingers with hers easily, the gesture natural because it wasn't rushed. They sat like that, letting the moment breathe. "I need to be clear too," Clara said. "I won't perform comfort for you. If I'm afraid, I'll say it." "I'd expect nothing less," Jason replied. "And I won't shrink myself to be easier," she continued. He smiled. "I don't want easy. I want true." That did it. That was the moment something shifted from possible to chosen. Eleanor knew before either of them told her. She noticed it in the way Clara moved through her house the following Sunday. Less guarded, more present. In the way Jason met her eyes with quiet confidence rather than polite reserve. "You've decided," Eleanor said, handing Jason a cup of tea. Jason smiled. "We have." Eleanor nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now comes the real work." Clara laughed. "There it is. Love is pleasant," Eleanor said briskly. "Respect is durable. You seem to be building the right thing." Jason inclined his head. "That's the plan." Eleanor smiled at him warmly. "You remind me of my husband." Jason blinked, caught off guard. "I hope that's a good thing." "It is," she said simply. "He chose me every day, even when it was inconvenient." Clara felt a swell of emotion and reached for Jason's arm. Choosing, she realized, wasn't a single moment. It was a pattern. Later that evening, Jason and Clara walked through her neighborhood. The air cool, the sidewalks familiar. They stopped beneath a streetlight, neither in a hurry to say goodbye. "I'm glad you didn't rush," Clara said. "I'm glad I didn't stall," Jason replied. She smiled. "That feels like balance." "It is," he said. "And I intend to keep it." She studied him, then nodded. "Me too." They hugged, warm, steady, unpretentious. No fireworks, just the kind of warmth that lasts. Steadiness, Jason thought as he walked home, wasn't about avoiding movement. It was about choosing direction. And for the first time, he wasn't walking alone. Not because someone filled a gap, but because someone matched his pace. Chapter 8, The Front Porch Test. The phrase "the front porch test" had come from Eleanor, delivered with the quiet authority of someone who had earned the right to coin such things. "You can always tell," she had said one afternoon, stirring sugar into her tea. "If you can imagine sitting with someone at 80 years old, saying very little and feeling content, then you're looking at the right kind of love." Jason had nodded at the time, filing it away not as sentiment, but as a metric. Clara hadn't heard the phrase yet, but she would. They drove out of the city on a Saturday that felt borrowed from a different life. The road stretched open and unhurried, the kind of drive that invited conversation without demanding it. Jason drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting easily near the center console. Clara watched the scenery shift from concrete to trees, the city loosening its grip mile by mile. "Thank you for inviting me," she said. "Thank you for coming," Jason replied. "I know meeting my parents isn't exactly a casual outing." Clara smiled. "I've met parents before." "Yes," he said, "but these are mine." She laughed softly. "Fair." Jason's parents lived in a quiet town an hour away, in the same house he'd grown up in. Nothing grand, just well-maintained, intentional, like everything else in his life. When they arrived, his mother was already on the porch. "She's early," Clara said. Jason smiled. "She always is." His mother, Linda Willis, hugged him first, then turned to Clara with warmth that felt genuine rather than performative. "You must be Clara," she said. "I'm so glad to finally meet you." "Likewise," Clara replied. "Jason's told me wonderful things." Linda glanced at Jason. "Has he now?" "He has," Clara said, smiling. "Mostly practical ones." Linda laughed. "That sounds like him." Jason's father, Tom, joined them moments later, handshake firm, eyes kind. They went inside, conversation flowing easily. Not forced, not guarded. Clara noticed how Jason moved in this space. Respectful without being deferential, comfortable without taking anything for granted. He was the same man here as he was everywhere else. That mattered. Over lunch, the talk turned naturally to values, work, commitment, the kind of life that lasted rather than dazzled. No one interrogated Clara. No one tested her. They simply included her. Jason watched her closely. Not anxiously, but attentively. She fit without effort. Not because she mirrored them, but because she met them honestly. Later, as the afternoon softened into evening, they sat on the porch. Jason leaned back in the old wooden chair, Clara beside him, the air warm and still. His parents chatted nearby, content in the presence of people they loved. Clara breathed it in. "This," she said quietly, "feels grounding." Jason nodded. "It always has." She glanced at him. "You come from steadiness." "So do you," he replied. "You just had to claim it." She smiled at that. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't itch. Then Clara spoke. "Can I ask you something serious?" "You can always ask me something serious," Jason said. "What happens if this changes?" she asked. "If we grow differently?" Jason considered the question carefully because it deserved that. "Then we talk," he said. "We don't pretend. We don't punish each other for becoming more ourselves." She nodded slowly. "And if it hurts, it probably will," he said. "But I don't believe avoiding pain is the same thing as avoiding regret." Clara exhaled, something untying in her chest. "I've spent so much time bracing," she said, "for disappointment, for inconsistency." "I know," Jason replied gently. "I don't want to be someone you brace for." She met his eyes. "You're not." That was the moment, the front porch test, though she didn't yet know its name. Clara imagined this future not as a fantasy, but as a continuation. Sitting beside him years from now, The same quiet ease. The same respect layered deeper with time. She could see it. And she didn't feel trapped. She felt chosen. They drove back as dusk settled. The road darker now, headlights carving steady lines forward. "Your parents are lovely," Clara said. "They'll be glad to hear that," Jason replied. "They try." She hesitated, then said, "I want you to meet my family." He smiled. "I'd like that. No performances," she added. "Of course not," he said. "I don't know how." She laughed. "I'm starting to believe that." They parked outside her apartment. Jason turned the engine off but didn't move to leave. "Clara," he said. "Yes. I don't want to be passive about us," he said. "I don't want to let time decide for us." She studied him, searching for pressure, for urgency disguised as certainty. She found none. "What are you saying?" she asked softly. "I'm saying I'm committed to building something with you," he said. "Not rushing, not stalling, just showing up fully." Her eyes warmed. "I'm already there," she said. He nodded, accepting that without triumph. They didn't rush the goodbye. They hugged warm, lingering, sure. As Jason drove home, Eleanor's words came back to him unbidden. 80 years old, on a front porch, saying very little. He smiled. He realized, it wasn't the absence of romance. It was the soil that let it grow. Chapter 9, Steady. Together, Jason didn't propose that year. That was not a delay. It was a decision. It would have been easy to mistake momentum for readiness, to confuse the beauty of what they were building with a need to seal it quickly, as if commitment spoiled when left in open air. Jason refused to do that. Clara, to his quiet relief, understood without needing reassurance. They chose instead to practice. They practiced showing up when tired. Practiced saying the uncomfortable thing before it grew teeth. Practiced disagreeing without keeping score. Practiced joy that wasn't performative and affection that didn't demand witnesses. They practiced respect. It showed up in small ways. Jason learned how Clara liked her mornings. Slow, quiet, no conversation until coffee. Clara learned that Jason processed conflict internally first and spoke when his thoughts had settled. Not because he was withholding, but because he was careful with words. They learned how to argue productively, which mostly involved listening longer than felt natural and refusing to weaponize vulnerability. They learned when to push and when to wait. They learned each other's rhythms. On a cool evening in early fall, they found themselves on Eleanor's porch, the three of them sitting with mugs of tea, the sky stretching into purple and gold. Eleanor's ankle had healed, though she still claimed the crutches when it suited her. "You know," Eleanor said, breaking the comfortable silence, "this is what I was hoping for." Clara smiled. "You orchestrated coffee. You can't take credit for everything." Eleanor sniffed. "I can take credit for noticing." Jason chuckled. "You noticed a lot." "I noticed character," Eleanor replied. "Everything else is decoration." They sat quietly after that. Jason felt the ease of it settle into his bones. This was the test. Not grand gestures. Not milestones announced too early. Just presence. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder without ceremony. Jason rested his cheek lightly against her hair. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Jason's friends noticed the change long before anyone made announcements. Ethan observed it during one of their weekly dinners when Jason excused himself to take a call. Not hurried, not apologetic. "She's important," Ethan said flatly when Jason returned. "Yes," Jason replied. Marcus grinned. "You look like someone who's found his lane." Jason considered that. "I think I always had one," he said. "I just wasn't sure who'd be riding with me." They raised their glasses. "To choosing well," Marcus said. Clara's friends noticed too, though they named it differently. "You're lighter," Lena said one afternoon. "Not louder, just steadier." Clara smiled. "He doesn't make me feel like I have to audition." Maya nodded. "That'll do it." The proposal came later, quiet, intentional, without spectacle. Jason asked Clara one evening in his living room. No audience, no urgency, just certainty. She said yes without tears, without surprise. Just joy. They told Eleanor first. "I knew it," she said, satisfied. Front porch people always know. Years later, much later, they would sit together on a porch of their own. Two chairs worn smooth by use. Glasses of iced tea sweating in the summer heat. The world quieter now, but not empty. Jason would look at Clara, lines at the corners of her eyes, hair touched with silver, and feel the same calm recognition he'd felt the first time she laughed across a coffee table. Steady. Not because life had been easy, but because they had chosen each other deliberately, again and again when it mattered. Respect had carried them. Love had grown. And on that porch, with nothing left to prove, Jason would think. Not with pride, not with nostalgia, but with deep, settled gratitude. This is the life I saved for.